Hey guys, tonight we step into the dim, salt-tinged air of Villalba, Sicily, where olive groves drink in the last light of day, and every cobblestone seems to have heard a secret. The hills roll like old shoulders hunched against the sea breeze, and a boy named Angelo Bruno grows up in the middle of it all, listening, learning, and absorbing rules that aren't written in any book. You probably won't survive this world if you think it runs on luck alone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop your location and your local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Villalba, in the early years of the 20th century, isn't the sort of place where life changes overnight. It's stubborn land, stubborn people, fields passed down for generations, work measured in seasons rather than hours. The market square is a heartbeat you can count on, steady and familiar. Here, faces rarely change, and strangers are remembered for decades. For young Angelo, the rhythms are comforting. His father, a man who understands both the soil and the unspoken rules among men, keeps his hands busy and his eyes sharp. His mother manages the household with a quiet authority that matches the father's, never raising her voice, but never needing to. The boy notices things other children might not. Which neighbor gets a nod in the square, and which is ignored. Which men step aside when a certain figure walks past. In this small town, respect is currency, and reputation is a shield. Angelo sees early that it's not always the loudest who command the most attention. Sometimes, the ones who speak least carry the deepest weight. Sundays are for mass, but they're also for observation. Inside the cool stone church, Angelo watches how the most influential men never rush for the front pews. They wait, letting others sit first, as if patience itself is a sign of strength. Afterward, conversations in the square run just as long as the priest's sermon. Deals about land, favors, or future arrangements might be wrapped in talk about the harvest. But everyone knows there's more beneath the surface. By his teenage years, Angelo understands enough to know when not to ask questions. His father doesn't talk about certain visitors, and Angelo doesn't press. Instead, he listens from the shadows, learning how a tone of voice can smooth over a brewing disagreement, or how a single raised eyebrow can stop an argument cold. Life isn't easy in Villalba. The land can be unforgiving, and opportunities for a young man are limited. The better ones, the kind that don't involve breaking your back for pennies, often come from those same quiet men who command the square. By the late 1910s, talk of leaving for America grows louder among families, especially those with relatives who've already made the journey. Letters arrive with foreign stamps and strange currency inside, proof that the world is bigger than this hillside town. The First World War leaves its marks even here. Food is tighter, tempers shorter. Some young men don uniforms and never return. Angelo sees his older cousins leave for the front, and he sees the hollowed look in their parents' eyes when the news comes back. It's one more lesson. Life can turn quickly, and safety is never guaranteed. For Angelo, the thought of America isn't just about money, it's about possibility. In Villalba, your path is set by birth, the land you'll work, the neighbors you'll deal with, the feuds you'll inherit. But across the ocean, there's room to become someone else. The idea takes root quietly, just as everything else in his life has, without fanfare, without announcement, growing stronger beneath the surface. Evenings are when the town softens. Women call children in from the square, and the smell of cooking fills the narrow streets. Angelo sometimes lingers outside the small cafe where older men play cards, listening to their laughter cut through the stillness. He knows enough not to get too close, but their easy camaraderie, born of long years and shared risks, plants a seed of what belonging might look like. By the time he turns 18, he carries himself differently, not with arrogance, but with the calm of someone who knows the value of watching before acting. Villalba has taught him that life is a long game, and every move matters. The streets, the fields, the square, they've been his first classroom. And while he doesn't yet know it, every lesson will follow him across the ocean, shaping the man he will become. The crossing is nothing like the dream. On paper, it's a ticket to a new life. In reality, it's weeks at sea with too many bodies and not enough air. Angelo boards in Palermo with a small trunk, a pocket full of lyre, and the address of a cousin who left for Philadelphia years earlier. The dock is a blur of shouted names, tearful goodbyes, and the smell of salt mixed with coal smoke. Families cling to one another until the ship's horn forces the separation. The gangway feels like a one-way bridge. Once you step onto it, you're gone. He takes a place on the lower deck with other young men who carry the same mixture of hope and wariness. The days blur into a routine of cramped sleeping quarters, tin plates of thin stew, and the endless creak of the ship's ribs. Outside, the Atlantic sprawls in every direction, an unmoving wall of blue-gray that makes the old country feel farther with every sunrise. There are moments of levity, card games, songs from home, stories swapped in the glow of a single lamp. But there's also the constant undercurrent of uncertainty. No one says it outright, but everyone knows there's no guarantee of what waits on the other side. You could find work and send money home, or you could vanish into the crowded streets of a city that forgets your name within an hour. Angelo spends much of the voyage watching. He notices the way the more experienced travelers choose their words carefully when talking about America. It's a place of opportunity, yes, but it's also a place where you start with nothing, where the wrong choice of friends can decide your fate as quickly as the right one. The sea itself becomes a kind of test. Storms batter the ship for days at a time, the decks slick with rain and salt spray. Sleep is broken by the groan of timbers and the crash of waves against the hull. He learns to brace himself instinctively, to move with the roll of the water rather than fight it. Patience, he thinks, is as important here as it was in Villalba. Wait for the storm to pass, and then move forward. On calmer days, he stands at the rail and imagines Philadelphia. His cousin's letters spoke of rows of brick houses, of work in warehouses and on the docks, of a neighborhood where Sicilian voices fill the air like home. It sounds both familiar and foreign. Streets lined with trolley tracks instead of donkey carts. Stores lit with electric bulbs instead of lanterns. When land finally appears, it's nothing like Villalba's rolling hills. The skyline is jagged with smokestacks and ship masts, and the air smells of iron and industry. The ship slides into the port under a haze that blurs the horizon, and the noise is overwhelming. Dock workers shouting, gulls crying overhead, machinery clanging like a constant drumbeat. Customs is its own trial. Officials move with the efficiency of men who've done this 1,000 times, eyes scanning papers and faces in equal measure. Angelo's English is limited, but he knows enough to answer questions with a steady voice. He passes inspection without incident, and the small, worn trunk is returned to him. His cousin is waiting near the pier, waving from the edge of the crowd. The reunion is brief but warm, the kind of greeting that says more in a clasp of hands than in a dozen sentences. They weave through the streets together, the clamor of the port fading into the hum of a working-class neighborhood. The houses are narrow but sturdy, their brick facades weathered but well-kept. Laundry lines stretch between windows, and children's voices spill into the street. That first night, over a plate of pasta in his cousin's kitchen, Angelo listens to the real story of life here. Work is available, but it's not always steady. Wages can vanish in a bad season, and competition for the best jobs is fierce. But there are ways, quiet ways, to supplement an income. Ways that require trust, discretion, and a willingness to learn fast. Lying awake in the small back bedroom, Angelo hears the city through the thin walls. A trolley rattling past, a dog barking 2 streets over, the low murmur of neighbors talking outside. It's not Villalba, but it's alive in its own way. He knows the rules here will be different, but he also knows that every street, no matter how new, has its own quiet order. Philadelphia wakes early, and Angelo wakes with it. The first light slips between the brick row houses, catching on the narrow windows and casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. The air smells faintly of coal smoke from kitchen stoves and the sour tang of the nearby factories starting their day. By the time he steps outside, workers in flat caps and worn coats are already on the move, heading toward the docks, warehouses, and streetcars that will scatter them across the city. His cousin wastes no time showing him around. The first stop is the Italian market, where vendors are setting up for the day. Here, the cadence of speech is a rapid mix of Sicilian dialect, Neapolitan sing-song, and the clipped syllables of English picked up out of necessity. Produce stands line the sidewalks, their tables heaped with tomatoes, peppers, and greens, brought in from farms just beyond the city. The smell of fresh bread drifts from a corner bakery, pulling at Angelo's stomach like a gentle hand. It doesn't take long for him to notice the same patterns he learned in Villalba. Certain men greet each other with a familiarity that's more than neighborly. Others step aside as 1 or 2 figures pass, not out of fear exactly, but out of an unspoken respect. Here, just like in the square back home, reputation has a gravity of its own. The cousin introduces him to shop owners, dock workers, and a few men whose professions aren't so openly discussed. Some shake his hand firmly, looking him in the eye. Others study him a moment longer before offering a brief nod. These small moments tell Angelo as much as any conversation could. First impressions are currency, and the less you say, the more people tend to listen when you do. Work comes quickly, though not the kind that fills a ledger in City Hall. His first job is hauling crates at the waterfront. The pay is modest, but it's enough to cover his share of rent and keep a few dollars in his pocket. The docks are their own small world, ruled by a rhythm of tides, loading schedules, and the unspoken agreements that keep things moving. Some crates get inspected closely, others barely at all. Angelo doesn't ask questions. He just makes sure to remember who gives the orders and who follows them. The physical work is punishing at first. His hands blister from the coarse rope, and the muscles in his back ache from long hours of lifting. But he's young, and the soreness becomes a dull companion rather than an obstacle. The real challenge is navigating the social currents. On the docks, a careless word can echo longer than you intend. A wrong joke, a misplaced question, and you might find yourself frozen out of a crew. Angelo learns to read the room before speaking, to weigh silence against the urge to fill it. Evenings bring a different kind of education. The cousin takes him to a neighborhood cafe where men gather over espresso and cigarettes. The talk here is more guarded than in the market, layered in code and half-statements. Someone mentions a shipment, but not what's in it. Another talks about problems on a certain street, but no one asks for details. Angelo listens, filing away every name, every reference, every subtle shift in tone. There's one regular in particular who catches his attention, an older man with silver hair and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. People lean in when he talks, but he never raises his voice. He asks Angelo a few questions, nothing too probing. Where he's from, how long he plans to stay, what kind of work he's looking for. The questions are casual, but the way he studies Angelo's answers feels like a quiet test. Life settles into a rhythm. Mornings at the docks, afternoons helping at his cousin's shop, evenings listening in on conversations that never quite say what they mean. The city itself becomes a map in his mind. Streets where you can linger, streets where it's better to keep moving, corners where a nod means you're known, and corners where it means you're being watched. One rainy night, walking home from the cafe, Angelo notices a man leaning in a doorway, lighting a cigarette. It's the silver-haired regular from earlier, watching the street with the calm of someone who's not afraid to be seen. Their eyes meet for a brief moment, and the man gives a faint smile before disappearing inside. It's a small gesture, but Angelo understands it for what it is, the beginning of something. In this new city, respect is still the currency. But here, earning it requires a different set of moves. Villalba taught him patience, but Philadelphia will teach him opportunity. The older man's name is never given outright. In the neighborhood, people refer to him as Zio, uncle, a title that means more than blood relation. He isn't loud about his presence, but the quiet orbit around him is unmistakable. Shopkeepers greet him with a nod that carries weight, and young men step aside when he walks past. It's not fear in their faces exactly. It's the kind of acknowledgement you give to someone who can change your fortunes with a single sentence. Angelo's cousin speaks of him sparingly, always with a slight lowering of the voice. "A man who's been around," he says one evening, stirring a pot of sauce as though the subject is no more remarkable than the weather. Knows how things work, knows who to talk to, and who not to. The cousin doesn't elaborate, but he doesn't have to. In places like this, omission is its own kind of statement. The connection is made casually, as if by accident. One afternoon, Angelo finds himself carrying a heavy crate from the market to a side street cafe. Zio is there, seated at a corner table, his coffee untouched as he talks with a man in a tailored coat. When Angelo sets the crate down, Zio glances at him and says, "Sit." It's not a request. The conversation that follows is unremarkable on the surface. He asks about Angelo's work, his family back in Villalba, his impressions of the city so far. But beneath each question is a subtle pressure, like a hand on the back steering him towards something unspoken. When they part, Zio doesn't say goodbye, just a nod, as if to mark the conversation as the beginning of a ledger entry. Weeks pass, and small tasks begin to appear. A delivery here, a message there. Angelo is never told outright what he's moving or why, but he notices the way people respond when they see him carrying Zio's instructions. Doors open more easily, conversations pause until he's gone, and a certain wariness enters the eyes of men who had barely noticed him before. The money is modest at first, enough to buy a new pair of shoes, to send a few dollars back home. But the real value is in the doors it opens. A handshake from one man leads to an introduction to another. Soon, Angelo is invited into the back rooms of cafes, where the air is thick with cigar smoke, and the talk is sharper, quieter, more deliberate. One night, he's called to join Zio and two other men in a dimly lit room above a bakery. The table is bare except for a bottle of red wine and a stack of ledgers. The talk is about shipments, not in the sense of crates and cargo, but in the language of percentages, routes, and trust. Zio says little, but when he does speak, the others listen without interruption. Angelo sits mostly in silence, but he's not idle. He notes the way one man leans forward when discussing a particular dock, the way another's eyes narrow at the mention of a rival neighborhood. He understands that these are not random observations. They are pieces of a larger picture, one he's slowly being invited to see. Outside of these circles, life continues in its ordinary rhythms. The market bustles, children play in the street, and the city's heartbeat remains steady. But Angelo begins to feel the invisible map shifting beneath his feet. Certain streets now carry new meaning, certain names a new weight. The city's layers are peeling back, and with each new task, he steps deeper into a world that rewards the careful and punishes the careless. One rainy evening, walking home from another quiet meeting, he catches sight of his reflection in a darkened shop window. The face looking back is the same, young, dark-eyed, calm. But there's something in the set of his shoulders that wasn't there before. He's no longer just a boy from Villalba trying to find work in a strange city. He's becoming someone who moves with purpose, who knows where he's headed, even if the destination isn't yet in sight. The lesson is clear. Here, opportunity doesn't arrive with a grand announcement. It comes in the form of a nod across a cafe, a seat at a quiet table, and the unspoken agreement that once you step in, you don't step back. The numbers game is the first real business Angelo touches that has structure, an operation with moving parts, trusted runners, and a steady stream of cash that doesn't answer to a payroll clerk. It's explained to him not as a gamble, but as a service, something the neighborhood depends on as much as the corner grocer. People place small bets on 3-digit numbers. Dreams are interpreted into combinations. And at the end of each day, someone tallies it all up in neat, careful handwriting. His role begins at the bottom, as it always does. He picks up slips from barber shops, fruit stands, and the back rooms of pool halls, tucking them into the lining of his coat. The paper feels weightless, but the responsibility is not. Each slip represents someone's hope for a quick turn of luck, and someone else's promise to make that luck possible, or make it vanish without a trace if things go wrong. The work takes him into corners of the neighborhood he's never walked before. In the mornings, he passes shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, giving him a glance that's somewhere between recognition and calculation. In the afternoons, he lingers in doorways, waiting for a nod from a man inside to signal it's safe to enter. The language is minimal, the transactions swift. It's here he starts to learn about the balance between risk and reward. The game thrives on predictability, numbers drawn at set times, payouts handled with precision, but its survival depends on flexibility. When the police push too close, the operation shifts like water around a rock. A meeting place changes, a runner is reassigned, and life continues without a ripple on the surface. Zio never says outright that the numbers game belongs to him, but Angelo doesn't need it spelled out. He can see it in the way other men defer to him when the subject comes up, in the way the daily totals are handed to him for review. Once or twice, Angelo catches sight of the ledger itself, columns of figures written in a script so meticulous it could be mistaken for art. Money from the game starts to pad Angelo's pockets more than the dock work ever could. He doesn't flaunt it. Villalba taught him better than that. But he allows himself small upgrades. A better coat for winter, a sturdy pair of leather gloves, the occasional dinner in a restaurant where the tablecloths are white and the waiters know your name. Still, he understands the danger. The game runs in a narrow space between community acceptance and law enforcement's disapproval. In the neighborhood, it's seen as a harmless indulgence, a way to pass the time and maybe catch a lucky break. To the police, it's a vice to be broken up, raided, and prosecuted. The trick is to keep it small enough to avoid attention, but large enough to matter. One evening, as they sit in the back of the cafe, Zio offers him something closer to advice than instruction. The thing about numbers, he says, sipping his coffee, is that they're the same everywhere. What changes is who trusts you to keep them honest. The words hang in the air long after the conversation shifts to other matters. Angelo takes them to heart. In this business, as in life, numbers are only as strong as the hands that hold them. A single mistake, misplacing a slip, shorting a payout, can unravel weeks of quiet work. But handle it well, and you're not just moving paper. You're moving trust. Over the months, he becomes known not for being the fastest runner or the most talkative, but for being the one who never loses a slip, never miscounts a stack, never forgets a face. And in a trade where memory and reliability are worth more than muscle, that's the kind of reputation that lasts. By the early 1930s, Angelo's presence at certain tables is no longer questioned. He has earned his chair, not through bluster or force, but through a record of doing what he says he'll do, quietly, on time, without drawing heat. It's this reliability that earns him a place in the small, late-night gatherings where neighborhood business is settled. These aren't the crowded cafes where talk leaks into the street. These are back rooms with curtains drawn, the air thick with cigar smoke, where the clink of glasses punctuates long silences. One such night, he's invited to a meeting in the upstairs room of a grocery store. The shelves below are stocked with imported olive oil and tins of anchovies, but upstairs the table is bare except for a bottle of wine and a few sheets of paper. Around it sit the men who keep the neighborhood in balance, shop owners, labor foremen, and a few whose occupations aren't listed anywhere official. It begins with talk of union disputes. Dock workers are restless, their wages squeezed, their hours stretched thin. A rival crew is whispering promises of better deals if they switch allegiances. Angelo listens as voices rise and fall, each man weighing the risk of confrontation against the need to protect their share. This is the first time he sees Zio in his element, not as the man in the cafe, but as a tactician. Zio doesn't dominate the conversation. Instead, he waits. He lets the others speak themselves into corners, into contradictions, until they begin to look his way for the answer they know is coming. When he does speak, it's measured. He proposes a solution that costs less than a fight and gains more than a truce. A small concession on hours, a quiet word with the rival crew's leadership, and the assurance that any man switching sides will find work elsewhere, far elsewhere. Angelo studies the way the room changes once Zio has spoken. The tension doesn't vanish, but it eases, replaced by the nods of men who've just been reminded why they come to him in the first place. This is how order is kept, not with loud threats, but with decisions that leave no room for doubt. After the meeting, as they descend the narrow stairs, Zio says to Angelo, You see how it works? You give enough so they think they've won something. But you keep the thing you can't afford to lose. It's not a lecture, just an observation, but Angelo knows it's meant for him. In the weeks that follow, he begins to take a more active role. When a shop owner complains about a supplier raising prices, it's Angelo who arranges for a better deal. When a foreman is short a few men for a big unloading job, Angelo finds replacements before the workday starts. Small actions, but each one adds another thread to the web of trust binding him to the neighborhood. He also learns that these gatherings are as much about preventing trouble as they are about solving it. A whisper about a newcomer muscling into the market, a rumor of an unfamiliar car seen parked near the docks. These things are noted, discussed, filed away. Sometimes nothing comes of them. Sometimes weeks later, he hears that a conversation was had and the problem quietly moved on. Not all nights are about tension and strategy. Some are almost social. Bottles opened, cards dealt, stories from Sicily traded across the table. But even then, business seeps into the edges. A joke about a lazy longshoreman might be followed by a subtle reminder to keep him in line. A toast to an absent friend might double as a warning that loyalty is noticed, and absence even more so. For Angelo, these evenings confirm something he suspected since Villalba. Real power doesn't always announce itself. It sits at the table, patient and deliberate, and lets others fill the silence. It knows that the most dangerous man in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it. The market is a stage where alliances are made and tested daily. Stalls overflow with produce, cured meats hang from hooks, and the air hums with the noise of bargaining. But beneath the banter over the price of figs or a string of sausages runs a quieter current, one Angelo has learned to hear. It's in the way two butchers lean close to speak, their words covered by the clatter of a delivery cart. It's in the nod exchanged between a grocer and a bookmaker passing by. By now, Angelo knows most of the faces here. He's no longer the newcomer trailing behind his cousin. He moves through the market with an easy familiarity, stopping to shake hands or share a few words. These brief encounters are never wasted. A quick chat about the quality of the oranges might lead to a mention of a supplier's late shipment, which might lead to the name of someone trying to muscle in on a delivery route. Every detail is a piece of the larger map he keeps in his head. Friendships in the market aren't built on sentiment. They're maintained through reciprocity. When a bakery's flour order is held up at the docks, Angelo finds a way to get it released within the day. When a fruit seller needs change for a large bill, he produces it without hesitation. These small gestures create an obligation, and obligations have a way of keeping doors open. Still, he's careful about overextending. In this environment, favors are a currency, and spending too freely can leave a man empty-handed when he needs it most. Zio once told him, "You help enough to be remembered, but not so much they forget how to manage without you." Angelo carries that balance like a ledger in his mind, measuring each interaction with care. Not everyone in the market is an ally. There are traders with ties to rival crews, men whose smiles never reach their eyes. Angelo doesn't provoke them, but he doesn't ignore them either. He watches how they move, who they speak to, and how quickly their mood changes when certain names are mentioned. The bookmakers are a category all their own, half in the open, half in the shadows. They set up near the cafes, their customers loitering with cups of coffee and folded slips of paper. Angelo exchanges polite greetings, but keeps his business with them to the essentials. Trust in this part of the market is as fragile as a paper bet slip, and one wrong word could mark a man for months. One crisp autumn morning, an incident reminds him how quickly market politics can turn. A vendor known for keeping a clean stall suddenly finds his delivery spoiled. Crates of fish arriving late, the ice melted, the smell enough to keep customers away. Whispers point to a rival who covets his prime corner spot. Angelo is asked to look into it, which in this context means having a quiet conversation with the right people. 2 days later, the problem disappears. The deliveries arrive fresh, the stall is busy again, and no one talks about the incident. But Angelo notices the rival keeping his distance from that corner now, his gaze sliding elsewhere. In the market, messages don't have to be shouted. They can be delivered in the simple act of making a problem vanish. As winter approaches, the rhythm of the market shifts. The produce stalls thin out, replaced by barrels of olives, jars of preserved peppers, and crates of chestnuts. The chatter grows more deliberate, as though the cold sharpens both tongues and tempers. Angelo finds himself spending more time indoors, cafes, storerooms, back rooms, where deals are made in the warm shadow of coal stoves. Through it all, the lesson is constant. In the market, as in the street, survival depends on reading the room before you step into it. And the man who can listen longer than he talks will always leave with more than he came for. By the time Angelo has carved out his steady role, the rest of the city is learning his name. Not because it's whispered in fear, but because it's spoken in appreciation when trouble quietly disappears. He has built something rare in his line of work, a reputation for keeping peace in a world where peace is usually the first casualty. It's not that he avoids confrontation altogether. It's that he prefers to solve it before it reaches the point of no return. When two shopkeepers quarrel over a disputed delivery, he listens to both, asks questions that cut to the heart of the matter, and proposes a settlement that lets each walk away with dignity intact. When a young man from a restless crew tries to stir up a feud in the market, Angelo steers him into a cafe for coffee and a slow talk about the difference between making a name and keeping one. The neighborhood begins calling him the Gentle One, in quiet reference, a nickname that fits but doesn't tell the whole story. Gentleness, in Angelo's view, is simply another form of control. A calm word at the right time can carry more weight than a raised fist, especially when everyone knows the fist is still there if needed. Zio takes notice. One evening, in the back corner of their usual cafe, he leans forward and says, "People think you're easy because you smile. Let them think it. But don't ever forget what they're really afraid of." It's advice wrapped as a warning, and Angelo stores it away. This philosophy serves him well when larger tensions ripple through the city. In the mid-1930s, competition between factions is sharpening. Philadelphia's underworld is a patchwork quilt stitched from Sicilian, Neapolitan, Irish, and Jewish crews, each with its own territories and traditions. While others jostle for dominance, Angelo focuses on strengthening the quiet bonds within his own circle. He avoids grand gestures, instead doubling down on the kind of diplomacy that keeps small disputes from becoming large ones. It's not without risk. Some see restraint as weakness, an invitation to test boundaries. Angelo meets these challenges with a firm but measured hand, never overreacting, but never leaving a slight unanswered. Once, when a rival crew accidentally sends men to collect from a fruit wholesaler under his protection, the mistake is corrected the next day. No shouting, no violence in the open, just a conversation that leaves the rival's collectors reassigned to a different street. The wholesaler, grateful and relieved, doubles his loyalty. This method of operation doesn't go unnoticed outside the neighborhood. From time to time, men from other parts of the city come to see how he runs things. Some are there to admire, others to measure him for weakness. Angelo treats them all the same, with courtesy, but with the quiet assertion that this is his ground and that stability here benefits everyone. The longer he works this way, the more he sees that peace, when properly managed, can be as profitable as war. Shops stay open, money changes hands predictably, and no one wastes resources on cleaning up after chaos. It's a philosophy that suits him, and one that will, in time, shape his entire legacy. One cold night, as he walks home under the dim glow of street lamps, he hears the faint strains of a mandolin from an upstairs window. The sound takes him back to Villalba, to the warm evenings when music drifted through the square and the air smelled of wood smoke and olives. He realizes then that what he's building here isn't just a network of business and influence. It's a kind of order that feels like home, even in a city half a world away. Atlantic City has been drawing attention for years. A glittering strip of boardwalks, hotels, and nightclubs perched on the Jersey shore, promising quick profits to anyone who can find the right angle. For Angelo, it's a place to extend influence without rattling the peace in Philadelphia. He approaches it the way he approaches everything. Slowly, quietly, as if wading into deeper water, one measured step at a time. His first visits are almost casual. He goes in the company of trusted men, blending in with the weekend crowd of gamblers, vacationers, and hustlers looking for an easy mark. The air smells of salt and fried food, the crash of the waves mixing with the brassy laughter spilling from casino doors. Underneath the tourist gloss, Angelo sees the real city, the back entrances where money changes hands, the upstairs rooms where games run long past closing, the warehouses along the inlet where shipments arrive without official paperwork. He isn't the first to see Atlantic City's potential, and he knows it. Other crews, some from New York, some from within New Jersey, already have their hooks in. But Angelo understands that raw ambition is no substitute for patience. He starts with relationships, seeking out the men who control the liquor distribution to the clubs, the ones who can open or close a tap with a single phone call. These are the gatekeepers, and winning their trust means more than buying a stake in a game. It's in one of these meetings, a quiet lunch in a seafood place that smells faintly of the docks, that he lays the groundwork. He doesn't pitch a takeover, doesn't flash promises he can't keep. Instead, he offers something simpler: reliability. No disruptions, no trouble with my people. You get your cut, we keep things smooth. In a city where the biggest fear is losing a night's profits to a brawl or a police raid, that kind of promise carries weight. Over the months, his presence becomes part of the background. Dealers know him, bartenders nod when he walks in, and the club owners greet him with the ease of a man they've come to depend on. He doesn't demand a show of loyalty. He earns it by ensuring problems don't make it to the front door. The money is good, but Angelo is just as interested in the information that flows through Atlantic City. Men talk more freely when they're away from home, and the gambling tables are a kind of confessional. A careless word from a visiting businessman can reveal a supply route worth protecting. A drunken boast from a rival can hint at trouble brewing back in Philadelphia. He keeps his moves subtle, never expanding so fast that the change draws attention. A few quiet investments in nightclubs here, a hand in liquor distribution there. It's enough to secure a steady income and a seat at certain tables, without waving a flag to every ambitious operator along the coast. One night, after settling a minor dispute between two club owners over a shipment of whiskey, Angelo walks along the boardwalk with the wind whipping in from the ocean. The lights of the city stretch behind him, and the waves hammer the pilings below. He thinks about Villalba again, the slow patience of the olive harvest, the understanding that rushing the work only spoils the result. Atlantic City, he realizes, is no different. You tend to it carefully, keep the storms at bay, and it will keep producing for as long as you're willing to watch over it. National meetings are nothing like the small, backroom gatherings Angelo is used to. These are orchestrated affairs, held in rented banquet halls or secluded resorts, where the country's most powerful figures in the underworld sit down to weigh the balance of their collective empires. By the late 1930s, Angelo has earned the kind of quiet reputation that makes his presence in such rooms possible, not because he demands a seat, but because his way of keeping peace in Philadelphia has kept business steady for everyone who matters. The first time he attends, it's in a hotel tucked along a rural highway, far enough from the city to avoid casual eyes. The parking lot is filled with sleek black sedans, each bearing men who carry themselves like they belong there. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and the mingled scent of cologne and coffee. The tables are arranged in a long rectangle, each seat filled by someone who commands a city, a port, or an industry. Angelo sits quietly at his assigned spot, listening before he speaks. The talk moves from one coast to the other. Shipments in New York, disputes in Chicago, whispers of trouble brewing in New Orleans. Everyone is careful with their words. No one here is naive enough to believe the walls don't have ears. But there's a rhythm to these meetings, a kind of shared understanding that the real decisions happen between the lines. At one point, the conversation shifts toward Atlantic City. Some see it as ripe for expansion, others as too volatile to touch. Angelo's contribution is measured. He describes the city as stable under current arrangements, emphasizing that disruptions would cost more than they'd gain. It's a statement dressed as an observation, but it plants a marker, an unspoken claim of stewardship without waving a flag. During breaks, men drift into smaller groups, coffee cups in hand, voices low. Angelo uses these moments to make quiet connections. A word with a distributor from Cleveland about supply routes, a handshake with a man from Florida who mentions the growing casino scene there. He doesn't push too far. These threads are for weaving later, not for pulling all at once. The most valuable part of these meetings isn't the formal talk. It's the chance to watch how the others operate. Some speak often, their voices filling the room with boasts and promises. Others, like Angelo, sit back, letting silence work in their favor until a single comment carries more weight than a dozen speeches. One evening, after the meeting adjourns for the day, a senior figure from New York approaches him in the hotel lounge. "You don't talk much," the man says, studying him over the rim of his glass. Angelo smiles faintly. "I talk when it matters." The man nods, a flicker of approval in his eyes. In this world, brevity can be as powerful as muscle. When the gathering finally ends, Angelo returns to Philadelphia with more than he came for. Not in cash, but in connections, names, faces, and quiet assurances that will serve him in the years to come. The city feels the same as when he left, but he knows better now. Philadelphia isn't an island. It's a node in a network that stretches far beyond the Delaware River. And in that network, the gentle dawn is beginning to leave his imprint. The knock comes just after dawn. A hard, deliberate rap on the door that carries the weight of official business. Angelo is already dressed. Years of habit have taught him that mornings can change quickly. When he opens the door, 2 federal agents stand there, hats pulled low, overcoats still wet from the rain. Their tone is polite but clipped. They have questions. The questions aren't new. They've been circling him for months now, about the market, the docks, Atlantic City. They never name specifics, but the implication hangs heavy in the air. Angelo invites them in, offers coffee, and answers in the same measured way he always does. Yes, he knows certain men. Yes, he's been seen in certain places. No, he has no knowledge of any illegal operations. His voice stays calm, steady, never defensive. The agents are trained to unsettle, to leave you speaking just a little too much. But Angelo knows the game. He offers them nothing more than courtesy. When they leave, they have no more than they arrived with. A vague sense that the man they're chasing will never be caught off guard. In the weeks that follow, their presence lingers. He notices a black sedan parked a little too long near the cafe. A stranger nursing a coffee for hours without drinking it. A pair of plainclothes men on the far side of the market who never seem to buy anything. The neighborhood notices too. Some take it as a sign to keep their distance. Others lean in closer, convinced that proximity to Angelo means protection. Zio's advice echoes in his mind. When the law looks at you, don't give them a reason to keep staring. Let them see what you want them to see. So Angelo doubles down on legitimate work, helping his cousin expand the shop, investing in a small produce business, attending church services more regularly. It's not a disguise. It's a reminder to anyone watching that his life has layers they can't easily sort through. Still, the line between legitimate and otherwise remains thin. One evening, as he's locking up the shop, a neighbor approaches with a quiet warning. A friend in City Hall overheard his name in a conversation about upcoming raids. The neighbor doesn't know if it's real or just talk, but Angelo treats it as truth. He spends the next week shifting certain meetings to new locations, making sure sensitive conversations happen in moving cars or during walks through the park. When the raids come, they bypass his operations entirely. Others aren't so lucky. Word spreads quickly about a gambling room in South Philadelphia that's been cleaned out, its owners facing charges that could stick. Angelo doesn't gloat. He knows luck is only part of the equation. Planning, patience, and a willingness to move before the trouble arrives. That's the rest. The agents return once more, this time in the middle of the day, their questions sharper. Angelo answers as before, unflinching. As they leave, one of them lingers on the step and says, "You've got a lot of friends in this city, Mr. Bruno." Angelo offers a thin smile. Friends are good to have. The door closes, and the conversation ends there. For the neighborhood, these visits only deepen his image. To some, he's the man who can stand eye to eye with the law and not flinch. To others, he's proof that there are still figures who can keep order even under pressure. For Angelo, it's a reminder that visibility is both a tool and a hazard, and that the art lies in deciding when to be seen and when to disappear into the crowd. Inside the family, tension moves like a slow leak, quiet, persistent, and dangerous if ignored. Philadelphia's network of men who handle business has always been a mix of personalities, the quick-tempered, the ambitious, the loyal, and the restless. For years, Angelo's steady hand has kept them balanced, but in the late 1930s, small fractures begin to show. It starts with disputes over territory. A crew working the northern edge of the city pushes further south than agreed, claiming a bar owner invited them in. The Southern crew, long tied to Angelo's side, sees it as encroachment. Meetings are held, voices rise, and while no one draws a weapon, the threat hums just beneath the table. Angelo steps in before it spills into the street. Over coffee at a neutral spot, he convinces both sides to step back, reminding them that a fight will only open doors for rivals outside the city. The compromise sticks, but he knows it's temporary. More troubling is the impatience of younger men in the ranks. They've grown up hearing stories of quick fortunes, of cities where violence settled arguments faster than conversation. To them, Angelo's measured approach feels like caution to the point of weakness. They want headlines, not quiet stability. They want to be feared. Angelo sees the danger in this. It's not that they're wrong about the money to be made in bold moves. It's that they underestimate the cost. One evening, a young capo named Frankie pushes too far. He shows up at the cafe, full of drink and bluster, demanding a bigger share from a numbers route that's not his. Angelo listens, letting him talk himself into a corner, then dismisses him with a calmness that chills the room. "You're thinking about today's money," Angelo says evenly. "I'm thinking about next year's." Frankie leaves, but not before giving a look that says the matter isn't closed. Zio warns him that such sparks can ignite quickly. "You've kept the peace so long, they've forgotten what the alternative looks like," he says. "Sometimes you need to remind them, just a little, why peace is worth keeping." Angelo doesn't disagree, but he's reluctant to use fear as a blunt instrument. He prefers a balance, a demonstration here, a concession there, always keeping the scales even. Behind closed doors, he starts adjusting the structure. The most restless men are given work that takes them out of Philadelphia for a while, helping in Atlantic City, making deliveries to New York. The loyal core stays close, their hands in the operations that matter most. By shifting the pieces without announcing it, Angelo cools the temperature without anyone losing face. Still, he knows the calm is fragile. The city is full of outside influences. New York's reach grows longer, Jersey crews sniff for opportunity, and law enforcement keeps probing for weak points. The family can't afford to turn inward, while the rest of the world moves against them. One night, as he walks home from a late meeting, Angelo passes a group of young men leaning against a wall, their laughter sharp and careless. He recognizes two of them from Frankie's crew. They nod in greeting, but he catches the quick glance they exchange afterward. It's the look of men who think they've found a seam in the armor. Back in his quiet kitchen, Angelo pours a small glass of wine and sits at the table, thinking. He knows the truth Zio spoke. Peace without the memory of war is taken for granted. The trick will be to remind them, just enough, without inviting the chaos he spent a lifetime avoiding. The lure of casinos is impossible to ignore. Even for a man as cautious as Angelo, the prospect of a steady cut from games that never close is a temptation worth considering. Atlantic City already provides a taste of it. Quiet investments in clubs where cards are dealt upstairs and dice roll in back rooms. But by the early 1940s, bigger ventures begin to take shape. These aren't the grand resorts you'd see in Nevada decades later. They're modest by comparison, tucked into buildings that could pass for dance halls or theaters. The front rooms serve food and drinks. The back rooms hold the real profits. What draws Angelo isn't just the money, it's the control. In a casino, everything is accounted for. Every bet, every payout, every table's take. It's a numbers game on a grander scale, wrapped in entertainment. He starts small, backing a few tables in a club run by an Atlantic City partner he's known for years. The arrangement is clean. His name never appears on paper. His share delivered in envelopes through trusted hands. At first, he visits only occasionally, walking the floor as a silent observer. He studies how dealers manage their tables, how pit bosses handle disputes, how the flow of money moves from customer to cage to back office. The challenges are immediate. Competition for territory inside the city is fierce, and out-of-town interests circle like gulls over the boardwalk. Angelo's approach is, as always, to avoid open confrontation. Instead, he secures his foothold by providing what others can't: stability. When a high-rolling guest loses big and threatens to cause trouble, Angelo ensures the matter is settled quietly. When the police make their periodic raids, his tables are untouched, either through luck, timing, or the quiet understanding that he doesn't disrupt the city's balance. The real test comes when a rival from North Jersey tries to plant dealers in one of the clubs under Angelo's umbrella. It's a move meant to siphon off profits, not through theft, but by stacking the tables with their own people. Angelo doesn't respond with threats. Instead, he meets with the club owner and proposes a rotation of staff, citing the need for fresh faces to keep customers interested. Within a week, the rival's men are gone, replaced by dealers loyal to Angelo's network. The shift is smooth, face-saving, and final. The profits grow steadily. Each month brings a quiet envelope, thicker than the last. But Angelo measures success not in the cash alone. It's in the way his presence is felt without being announced. Club owners greet him with respect. Competitors think twice before testing his ground, and partners know that working with him means fewer problems and more predictable returns. One late night, after the tables close, Angelo stands on the empty floor. The felt is still warm from hours of play, and the faint scent of tobacco hangs in the air. Outside, the boardwalk is quiet, the waves breaking in the dark beyond. He thinks about how far this world is from the dusty streets of Villalba, yet how the same rules apply. Know the players, control the pace, and never let greed outrun caution. Casinos, he realizes, are just another kind of market. Only here, the goods are chance, and the currency is human desire. And like any market, the one who keeps it running smoothly will always have a place at the table. Nightclubs are a different game entirely. If casinos are about steady calculation, clubs are about atmosphere, noise, light, and the art of making people forget the hour. In Philadelphia, certain streets hum after dark with neon signs, jazz spilling into the night air, and the slow crawl of cars looking for a place to stop. Angelo sees opportunity here, not just for profit, but for influence. The first club he touches isn't even his idea. A longtime acquaintance, part showman, part hustler, approaches him with a problem. A once popular spot has fallen on hard times. The band is good, the location is decent, but the management is sloppy, and the debts are piling up. The banks won't help, and the current owner is looking for a way out before the lights go dark for good. Angelo agrees to take a look. He spends 2 nights there, sitting in the corner with a drink, watching everything. He notes which waiters move quickly and which avoid eye contact with customers, how the bartender handles a crowd, how the band plays to half-empty tables. He sees wasted potential everywhere, and with it, the possibility of a turnaround. The deal is quiet. Angelo doesn't buy the club outright. Instead, he finances its debts through an intermediary, taking a cut of the monthly profits in return. On paper, nothing links him to the place. In practice, his hand is in every decision. The first change is the staff. Lazy servers are replaced, the bar is stocked properly, and a doorman is hired who can recognize both good customers and troublemakers before they step inside. Music is the lifeblood of a club, so he invests in a better band. A talented singer with a smoky voice becomes the centerpiece, drawing a crowd that fills the tables and keeps the cash flowing at the bar. Word spreads, and soon the club is buzzing again, its reputation restored in a matter of months. With success comes attention. Other owners, some struggling, some simply curious, start to approach Angelo. He listens more than he talks, choosing his investments carefully. Some deals are purely financial, others give him a quiet say in how the clubs are run. In time, he has a small constellation of night spots under his influence, each with its own character, but all operating smoothly, without the kind of trouble that brings unwanted eyes. The clubs also become a social network of their own. Politicians, businessmen, and entertainers drift in and out, sharing drinks, making deals in the corners. Angelo understands the value of these connections. A night of good hospitality can do more for an alliance than weeks of negotiation. He makes it a point to be seen occasionally, never overexposed, always approachable, the man who knows the owner and can make introductions. Of course, the same qualities that make clubs valuable also make them vulnerable. A brawl can clear a room. A police raid can sink a reputation overnight. Angelo's strategy is prevention, security that's firm but discreet, relationships with local authorities, and an unspoken rule that anyone bringing trouble to his places won't be welcome again. One late evening, as the band slides into its last set and the crowd sways with the rhythm, Angelo stands by the back wall, watching the room. Glasses clink, laughter rolls, and for a moment it feels like the whole city is at ease. He knows it's an illusion. Trouble is never far, but he also knows he's the one making the illusion possible. Nightclubs, he realizes, are like people. They survive on attention, but thrive on respect. And if you can give them both in the right measure, they'll keep your pockets lined and your name in the right conversations for years to come. By the late 1940s, whispers from New York begin drifting south with a sharper edge. The Commission, the loose council of bosses who keep the national peace, has its eyes on Philadelphia. For years, Angelo's city has been considered stable ground, a reliable contributor to the larger network. But stability draws interest, and interest can turn into influence if not carefully managed. The first sign comes in the form of a visit. A pair of well-dressed emissaries from one of New York's families arrive unannounced, all polished smiles and easy conversation. Over a long lunch in a private dining room, they talk about shared opportunities and mutual interests. The words are polite, but Angelo knows their meaning. They're measuring the city's pulse, looking for points where they might press a finger. He listens, nods in the right places, but offers nothing concrete. Instead, he frames Philadelphia as content, running smoothly, profitable for all involved, not in need of intervention. The visitors leave without a commitment, but Angelo can feel the shift. The fact they came at all means the balance is changing. Over the next months, the pressure grows. Small ventures along the border between New Jersey and Pennsylvania, places that once operated quietly under local control, start reporting offers from out-of-town partners. The offers are generous, sometimes too generous, as if designed more to gain a foothold than to turn a quick profit. Angelo counsels patience to his people, warning them not to bite at the bait. In private, he seeks to strengthen the city's defenses, not with guns, but with agreements. club owners, suppliers, and key street figures are reminded of the benefits of staying close to home. Some of these reminders come in the form of favors repaid, others in debts quietly forgiven. Loyalty, he knows, can be bought, but it holds longer when it's earned. The real test comes when a dispute over a small but lucrative gambling operation threatens to spill over. A New York-connected crew claims rights to a piece of action in South Philadelphia, citing an old agreement Angelo has never heard of. The situation is delicate. Push too hard, and he risks sparking a feud that could pull in the commission. Yield too easily, and he invites further encroachment. He chooses a middle path. A meeting is arranged in a quiet restaurant halfway to Trenton. Over plates of pasta and the low hum of background music, Angelo lays out his position, firm, calm, unshakable. He offers a small slice of a lesser operation in exchange for leaving the disputed territory untouched. It's a trade that costs him little, but signals that Philadelphia is willing to negotiate on its own terms. The agreement holds, but Angelo doesn't mistake it for a permanent solution. New York will always watch, always wait for the moment when the gentle dawn's calm turns into complacency. And he knows that as the years pass, the pull of larger powers will only grow stronger. Late one night, sitting alone in his study, he reflects on the lesson Villalba taught him as a boy. The most dangerous storms are the ones you can't see coming. He has kept Philadelphia's waters calm for decades, but calm seas can tempt others to sail in. It will take all his patience and all his quiet influence to make sure they find no harbor here. The labor unions have always been a double-edged sword, an asset when guided properly, a liability when left to their own devices. Angelo has seen both sides. In the post-war years, with the economy booming and construction projects reshaping Philadelphia's skyline, union contracts mean power. They decide who works, who waits, and how much the job will cost. It begins with a small request. A friend of Zio's nephew needs steady work on the docks. Angelo makes a call, the man is hired, and the favor is returned in quiet gratitude. But small favors often open bigger doors. Before long, he's invited to sit down with a handful of union stewards over lunch in a dimly lit tavern. The talk is informal, but it doesn't take long for them to bring up grievances, contract disputes, wage disagreements, and the ever-present threat of strikes. Angelo listens more than he speaks, asking pointed questions that make the stewards look at each other before answering. He offers no immediate promises, but within a week, a troublesome supplier has suddenly met the terms the union demanded. No one says how it happened, but the stewards know who moved the stone out of their path. From there, his influence grows naturally. He's careful not to be seen as running the unions. Too much attention invites government eyes. But he positions himself as the man who can keep things from boiling over. When negotiations stall, he's the one who finds a middle number everyone can live with. When tempers flare, he's the one who calls for a walk in the cold night air until cooler heads prevail. The city's business community notices. Contractors learn that working in Angelo's orbit means fewer delays, fewer surprise work stoppages, and fewer inflated costs. They don't mind the quiet cost of his consulting, considering it a small price for stability. The arrangement benefits everyone, except, of course, those who might want to use union unrest as leverage against him, and those men do appear. A crew from outside the city makes a move to influence one of the waterfront locals, promising higher payouts to stewards in exchange for control of certain shipping schedules. Angelo gets wind of it before the ink dries on their first handshake. His response is swift but controlled. A meeting is called, hands are shaken, and the outsiders leave with a promise of cooperation that evaporates the moment they hit the highway. The stewards stay loyal, their confidence in him reinforced by the quiet way he handled the matter. Zio, now older but still sharp, watches this expansion with a mixture of pride and caution. "The unions will feed you if you respect them," he says one night over espresso. "But if you choke them, they'll bite." Angelo nods. He has no desire to choke anything. His goal is to keep the machinery moving, the pay envelope steady, and the streets free of the kind of chaos that brings reporters and police with cameras. By the end of the decade, his reach into the unions is deep enough that any major project in Philadelphia passes through his sphere of influence, whether the city council realizes it or not. Yet, true to form, Angelo avoids putting his name on anything. His role exists in the spaces between contracts and conversations, as invisible as the air that keeps a fire alive. Late one winter evening, walking along the waterfront, he passes a crew finishing up under the glow of a single work light. The foreman nods respectfully. Angelo returns the gesture, thinking how far this is from the boy in Villalba, watching older men settle disputes in the town square. The stage is bigger now, the players more numerous, but the script hasn't changed. Keep the peace, keep the work moving, and make sure everyone knows whose hand steadies the wheel. The wiretap years creep in quietly, like fog rolling off the river. Angelo has always known the law listens in ways that eyes can't see, but by the early 1950s, the technology has outpaced the old tricks. Lines can be tapped without the telltale click, rooms bugged without the visible glint of a microphone. Whispers about federal ears start in New York and soon drift into Philadelphia. The first hint comes from a friendly clerk at a phone exchange who passes a message through one of Angelo's men. Certain calls are being traced, certain names flagged. Angelo doesn't panic. Panic is exactly what wiretaps are meant to provoke. Instead, he changes the tempo. Conversations that once happened over the phone now take place in person, during long walks through crowded markets or along the piers where the wind drowns out stray words. He also develops a rhythm for meetings. The most sensitive matters are discussed only after an hour of casual talk. Business about family, food, sports. Forcing any listener to wade through layers of harmless chatter before reaching the substance, if they reach it at all. Even then, the real decisions are phrased in ways that mean nothing without context. A mention of 2 crates of olives might refer to a shipment from Sicily, or to an arrangement about which crew will handle a new card game. Still, there are close calls. One afternoon, a union steward visits his office looking rattled. A man he barely knows repeated something he thought he'd told Angelo in confidence. Word for word. It's enough to confirm what Angelo already suspects. The conversation had been overheard. He thanks the steward, and by that evening, the meeting place in question is permanently abandoned. The FBI's presence grows more obvious. Men in unmarked cars linger near cafes. Agents in plain suits pretend to read newspapers in the park. Angelo treats them as part of the scenery. Ignoring them completely would look suspicious. Acknowledging them with a nod or a faint smile keeps the balance. It says, "I see you, and I'm not afraid." In private, his closest circle learns new rules. Never use names on the phone, never discuss numbers in public, and never assume you're alone, even in your own home. Some find the caution exhausting, but Angelo insists. Loose talk sinks more than ships, he tells them. It sinks people. The pressure doesn't stop business. but it changes its shape. Meetings are smaller, movements less predictable, deals arranged in places the law would overlook, church basements, side rooms of funeral homes, even during noisy wedding receptions where toasts and music cover every word. Ironically, the constant surveillance strengthens his discipline. He becomes sharper in conversation, more deliberate in choosing what to say and when. Those who deal with him notice that his words carry extra weight now because they are so few. In a city where too many men talk themselves into trouble, Angelo's restraint becomes an asset even his rivals respect. One rainy night, leaving a quiet dinner, he passes a parked car with two silhouettes inside. Their windows are fogged, but he can feel their eyes on him. He doesn't hurry, doesn't look away. The street lamp catches the faintest smile on his face as he turns the corner. If they want to listen, let them. All they'll hear is what he wants them to. Philadelphia politics has always had two faces, the one in the newspapers and the one in the quiet backrooms. Angelo never runs for office, never gives speeches, but he understands that influence in City Hall can be as valuable as any territory. A well-placed friend in the right committee can keep inspectors away from a nightclub, smooth over permit delays for a favored contractor, or make sure certain raids happen somewhere else. The first connection is almost accidental. A councilman from South Philadelphia, known for his fondness for the Italian market's espresso bars, strikes up a conversation with Angelo one morning. They talk about nothing more serious than the weather and the state of the roads. But within a week, the councilman calls to ask if Angelo can recommend a reliable supplier for a neighborhood festival. The request is simple, and Angelo delivers. The following month, a minor zoning issue affecting one of his associates quietly disappears from the city's agenda. From there, the pattern takes shape. Angelo never pushes too hard. He offers small favors, solves small problems, and in return, City Hall keeps an ear open to his concerns. Sometimes it's as subtle as hearing about a planned crackdown a week before it hits the papers. Other times, it's as concrete as seeing a competitor's business tangled up in red tape while his own sails smoothly forward. He's careful to keep these relationships layered. A councilman introduces him to a deputy commissioner. A ward leader connects him with someone in the licensing office. Each link is separated by plausible distance. No one person can be accused of dealing directly with him in a way that would stick. And when these contacts meet Angelo, it's always in public, always framed as coincidence. A handshake at a charity dinner, a chat at a Little League game, a polite greeting at a church fundraiser. The benefits go beyond business. Political allies can provide cover in ways money alone can't. When law enforcement pressure spikes, an unexpected voice in the right office might argue for resource reallocation, steering attention toward more sensational targets. When neighborhood tensions threaten to spill over, a quiet word from a respected figure can rally community leaders to calm things down. Of course, politics is its own game of loyalty. Friends in City Hall expect their help to be remembered, especially come election season. Angelo is no stranger to campaign donations, always funneled through legitimate fronts, and to making sure a club or restaurant is packed on the night a candidate stops by. A little theater goes a long way in keeping alliances warm. One evening, after a charity banquet at a riverside hall, Angelo walks with the councilman along the darkened street. The city skyline glows in the distance, a patchwork of lights reflected in the water. The councilman says, "You've got a way of making things easy." Angelo smiles faintly, only for the ones who don't make them hard. It's a reminder that politics, like the streets, runs on the same principle. Those who keep the wheels turning earn their place. And Angelo has made sure that in Philadelphia, when something important needs to move, his hand is never far from the crank. The Atlantic City arrangement holds for years. But by the mid-1950s, a dispute begins to simmer beneath the surface. Casinos and clubs are still making money, but new players, some backed by out-of-state interests, want a bigger slice. It starts with whispers about shifting liquor contracts, then moves to more direct gestures, offers to buy out small venues, talk of streamlining the gambling floors, and casual questions about whether Philadelphia's share could be adjusted. At first, Angelo treats it as background noise. Business always attracts competition. But when one of his longtime partners quietly admits he's been approached with a deal too rich to refuse, Angelo knows the situation is moving toward a fracture. A single defection could unbalance the whole structure. He calls for a meeting, choosing neutral ground, a closed-for-the-season beach club whose only sound is the surf pounding the shore. Around the table sit representatives from both sides of the bridge, Philadelphia men, Atlantic City operators, and a few carefully invited outsiders who have a stake in keeping the peace. The conversation begins politely, all talk of shared history and mutual benefit. Then the numbers come out, and with them, the tension. The rivals argue for modernization, framing it as a way to bring in more tourists, and by extension, more profit for everyone. But Angelo hears the subtext. They want control, not improvement. He lets them speak, sipping his coffee until the room begins to cycle through the same points. Then, when the pause comes, he sets his cup down and says, "Tourists come for what's here already. Change it too much, and they stop coming. Then we're all dividing nothing." The statement lands heavier than its calm delivery suggests. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't need to. A few heads nod. Men who understand that disruption in Atlantic City's fragile balance could ripple all the way back to Philadelphia. The meeting ends without an agreement to change the current arrangement, but the undercurrent of challenge hasn't disappeared. Over the next months, small incidents test the boundaries. A shipment of premium whiskey goes missing for 2 days before reappearing with an apology. A dealer known to be loyal to Angelo is offered a higher salary to switch tables. Each move is answered quietly. The whiskey's supplier finds his future contracts drying up. The dealer is given a promotion and a raise before he can even consider leaving. The rivals learn, as others have before, that Angelo's way of defending territory isn't about making a scene. It's about making every challenge more trouble than it's worth. By the time summer crowds return, the boardwalk is humming again under the same order as before. One warm night, standing at the edge of the pier, Angelo watches the neon lights ripple across the water. The city feels steady for now, but he knows Atlantic City will always attract ambitious men who think they can reshape it in their image. His job is to make sure they understand that its shape and its profits are already spoken for. Inside his own ranks, Angelo senses the shifting air. Years of quiet leadership have kept the city balanced, but younger men, bolder, hungrier, are starting to murmur. They respect him, but they don't fear him in the way that once came naturally. Some see the calm as an invitation to test the boundaries. Others mistake his preference for diplomacy as proof that the old man's edge has dulled. It begins with small gestures. A collection from a protected bookmaker arrives short, and the crew responsible offers only a shrug and a vague excuse. A bar owner who owes a favor takes his time repaying it, confident that Angelo won't press. None of these incidents are catastrophic, but together they sketch a picture of restlessness. Angelo has no interest in ruling through paranoia, yet he knows that a network survives on perception. If people believe the center is soft, the edges will start to fray. So he decides to reassert his presence, not with violence for its own sake, but with unmistakable reminders of where the lines are drawn. The first step is quiet observation. For weeks, he attends more meetings than usual, showing up unannounced at cafes and backroom gatherings. He listens, takes note of who looks uneasy, who overcompensates with too much friendliness. The effect is immediate. People begin to remember that the gentle Don's absence from certain rooms has always been by choice, not necessity. Then comes a calculated move. A young crew leader, emboldened by recent successes, tries to take over a lucrative dice game that's been under another man's care for years. Angelo steps in personally, calling both parties to a late-night sit-down in a shuttered restaurant. The conversation is calm, almost cordial, until Angelo turns to the young man and asks, "Do you remember who gave you your first route?" The silence stretches. The young man nods. Angelo leans back. "Then you remember it can be taken away." The game returns to its rightful place the next day. No threats, no scenes, just the unmistakable knowledge that Angelo's hand can still close around a situation when needed. For the rank and file, the message is clear. The calm isn't weakness, it's discipline. And discipline is what keeps the city from tearing itself apart. A few of the more ambitious men begin to temper their moves, redirecting their energy toward ventures that strengthen the family rather than splinter it. Zio, watching from the sidelines, offers a wry smile. "Sometimes," he says, "you have to show them the teeth under the smile." Angelo nods. He's never enjoyed the display, but he knows its value. In a world where loyalty is measured in both respect and fear, leaning too far toward either is dangerous. The balance, as always, is in the middle. That summer, as he walks through the Italian market on a Saturday morning, the greetings feel different, warmer, steadier, tinged with the quiet acknowledgement that the man in the gray fedora hasn't gone soft at all. He's simply been choosing his moments, and now everyone knows he's still choosing them. The last commission meeting Angelo attends carries an unspoken tension. By the early 1960s, the national balance is shifting. New faces are rising, old alliances are being tested, and the quiet rules that have kept the peace for decades are fraying at the edges. The meeting is held in a secluded hotel ballroom in upstate New York, far from the cities each man controls, but the sense of territory still hangs in the air. The table is long, the seats carefully arranged so that no one appears subordinate, yet everyone knows who holds the most sway. Conversation begins with formalities, updates on operations in Chicago, whispers about unrest in Detroit, questions about Las Vegas profits. Angelo speaks little, preferring to observe, but even in silence he sees the fault lines, men interrupting each other where they once deferred, eyes narrowing at small slights, side conversations that hint at private deals. When Philadelphia's turn comes, Angelo delivers his report with the same calm precision as always. The city is stable, revenues consistent, no major disputes to speak of. It's the truth, but he can feel the unasked question in the room. How long can you keep it that way? Over lunch, he moves through smaller groups, making quiet connections. A nod to a New Orleans figure he once helped avoid a union strike. A handshake with a Cleveland boss whose cousin runs a profitable card room in South Philly. These small gestures are insurance, threads in a web that might hold if the larger net begins to unravel. That afternoon, the discussion turns to enforcement. Some argue for harsher measures against crews stepping out of line, while others urge restraint to avoid attracting federal heat. Angelo listens as the voices grow sharper. When he finally speaks, it's not to take a side, but to remind the room that visible wars cost money, and invisible peace earns it. The customers don't care who's in charge, he says quietly. They care that the doors stay open, the words land, but not as heavily as they might have 10 years earlier. The room has more men eager for quick gains now, less patience for the long game. Angelo knows this mood. He's seen it in younger captains at home, and he knows it rarely ends without someone paying a high price. By the time the meeting adjourns, he's decided it will be his last. The commission is shifting toward a pace he has no interest in matching. Philadelphia needs him present, not distracted by battles brewing hundreds of miles away. That night, back in his hotel room, he pours a small glass of whiskey and sits by the window, watching the parking lot below as black sedans pull away one by one. The faces he saw today, some friendly, some calculating, fade into the dark. He thinks of Villalba, of the slow patience of olive harvests, and knows that pace still serves him better than any sprint for power. Leaving the commission's table doesn't mean stepping out of the game. It means choosing his own table in his own city, where he still controls the seating plan. The night drive begins without ceremony. A late March chill hangs in the air, the streets damp from a passing rain. Angelo leaves his Snyder Avenue home just after 10, sliding into the passenger seat of his chauffeured sedan. The city feels hushed, the kind of quiet that makes every passing car sound louder than it should. The route is familiar, across South Philadelphia, past rows of brick houses and shuttered corner stores. He sits back in the leather seat, hands folded over his coat, speaking little. His driver, a trusted man, keeps his eyes on the road, the wipers clicking rhythmically against the windshield. They are heading toward a meeting, a small one, nothing urgent on paper, just a quiet conversation to smooth over a minor disagreement in the numbers game. Angelo has made drives like this for decades, sometimes with company, sometimes alone, but always with the same calm pacing. He's never been one for entourages or loud escorts. Even in unsettled times, he prefers a low profile. Tonight is no different. Still, there's a faint electricity in the air, a tension he can't quite name. They pass through neighborhoods where his influence runs deep. Men on stoops give a nod as the sedan rolls by. A shopkeeper closing up for the night glances toward the car with quick recognition. These streets have been his domain for years, the rhythm of their life moving in step with his decisions. At one intersection, a black sedan idles half a block away, headlights off. The driver notices it, but says nothing. In Philadelphia, cars come and go. It's the ones that stay too long you remember. Angelo's gaze flicks to the side mirror, then back to the road ahead. No comment, no visible shift in posture. The city center is quiet this time of night. The neon signs from bars casting blurred reflections on wet pavement. They pass an all-night diner, its windows fogged from the heat inside, and then turn down a narrower street lined with parked cars. The driver slows, scanning for the address. In the dim glow of a street lamp, a group of men stand near a corner, their breath visible in the cold air. One steps forward slightly, as if to greet the car, but then steps back. Angelo doesn't react. His attention is on the rhythm of the drive, the slow crawl, the pause before each turn. They are 2 blocks from their destination when the first sharp sound cracks the quiet. The driver's head turns instinctively, eyes scanning the shadows. Another sound follows, closer this time. Angelo's expression doesn't change. Whether it's an argument spilling into the street or something more deliberate, he has always believed in meeting whatever comes with composure. The sedan rolls on, the city's damp air pressing against the glass. The meeting ahead still waits, the conversation still to be had. But in Philadelphia's undercurrent, where every street has two stories, the one on the map and the one in the shadows, any night drive can change its ending without warning. The blast comes in a blur, louder than the city's night sounds, heavier than any backfiring engine. The windshield erupts in a spiderweb of cracks, glass raining inward as the roar of a shotgun fills the narrow street. The driver jerks instinctively, but the sedan lurches only a few feet before coasting to a halt against the curb. For a moment, the world feels muted, as though the air itself has been punched from it. Angelo is slumped slightly in his seat, his hat tipped forward. The street lamp catches the glint of shattered glass in his lap. The driver calls his name once, twice, his voice tightening, but Angelo doesn't answer. Outside, the street is almost empty. A shadow moves near the corner, then another. No shouts, no lingering footsteps, just the retreating hum of a car accelerating away into the night. The silence that follows is heavy, as if the row houses themselves are holding their breath. Within minutes, the block begins to stir. Curtains shift, doors open a crack, faces peer into the dim light. No one steps forward right away. In neighborhoods like this, you learn to watch before you move, to measure the moment before deciding whether to be seen in it. A patrol car arrives quickly, too quickly for it to be coincidence. The officers approach with a caution, born from knowing exactly whose car this is. One leans into the open passenger door, takes in the scene, and steps back slowly. The look he exchanges with his partner is unreadable, but neither needs to say the name out loud. Word travels faster than the sirens. In cafes and clubs across the city, the news moves in low, stunned voices. The gentle dawn has been hit. The message lands differently with each listener. Shock for some, grim satisfaction for others, unease for nearly everyone. Some will say it was business, others that it was personal. Many people still think that it could only have been sanctioned at the highest levels, the kind of move no lone gunman would dare without a nod from above. So what do you think? Was it ambition, revenge, or the simple inevitability that shadows every man in Angelo's world? Back on Snyder Avenue, the lights in his home remain on into the small hours, relatives and friends gathering in the kitchen, their voices hushed. Outside, the rain begins again, washing the blood from the street into the gutter, carrying it away toward the dark sweep of the river. The news of Angelo's death doesn't just travel, it ripples. By morning, every corner of Philadelphia's underworld knows, and by midday, the official statements begin. The police release a brief note to the press, calling him a businessman and acknowledging an ongoing investigation. Reporters gather at the crime scene, their shoes damp from the rain, their voices carrying into the neighborhood. The words they use, mob figure, gentle dawn, underworld boss, compete with the residents' more careful phrases. A man who kept order, a man who kept the peace. In cafes, the talk is hushed but constant. Some speak of the way he kept disputes from spilling into the open, of how his presence meant fewer street wars, fewer broken shop windows. Others recall debts collected, deals enforced, and the quiet certainty that nothing in certain parts of the city happened without his say-so. Even those who feared him admit, sometimes grudgingly, that his rule was predictable, and predictable meant safe for those who played by the rules. Inside the family, the shock quickly turns to calculation. Angelo's style had been his own, patient, deliberate, favoring quiet solutions over open shows of force. Without him, the question looms, who will hold the center? The younger captains, many of them restless under his restraint, now see an opening. Some whisper of expanding territory, others of renegotiating old arrangements. The risk is clear. If too many moves are made too quickly, the stability Angelo maintained could fracture beyond repair. In Atlantic City, partners and rivals alike pause their games to assess what this means for the boardwalk's delicate balance. Some see opportunity, others, trouble. A few call Philadelphia directly, offering condolences that carry the unspoken weight of testing the new order. The funeral draws a crowd that reflects the breadth of Angelo's influence. Politicians arrive in dark coats, their eyes scanning the room. Business owners stand beside men whose names never appear in the papers. Floral arrangements crowd the altar, their ribbons marked with messages of respect in both English and Italian. Outside, the street is lined with cars, and plainclothes officers mingle with onlookers, taking note of every handshake. During the service, the priest speaks more of community than of crime. He calls Angelo a man of measured words and steady hand, someone who valued peace even when it came at personal cost. In the front pew, family members sit in silence, their grief held tightly in place. Afterward, as the procession moves toward the cemetery, the city feels suspended. For one day, even old rivals hold their tongues. But beneath the quiet, the machinery of the underworld is already shifting. Everyone knows that a leader's death is not just an ending, it's an invitation. And in Philadelphia, invitations like this are never left unanswered. Legacy is a word people use when they can't agree on a verdict. In Philadelphia, when the name Angelo Bruno comes up, voices soften or harden depending on where they stood when his shadow passed. He is remembered as the gentle dawn, the man who keeps a crowded city from shaking itself apart, and also as the patient ruler whose refusal to swing first leaves enemies time to circle. The truth, as it tends to do, lives in the overlap. He chooses peace as a method, power as a guarantee, and the order he builds stands or falls according to how well men remember both. In the months after his death, the map of the city redraws itself without ceremony. Those who benefited from the quiet, shopkeepers, truckers, union stewards who preferred steady pay to constant brinkmanship, feel the loss first. You can hear it in the way doors shut a little earlier, in the extra glance a foreman gives to a new face near the pier, in the nervous laughter at card tables that used to hum without strain. Quiet, it turns out, was a service as much as a style. History books point to a simple fact. From 1959 until March 21st, 1980, Angelo serves as the boss of the Philadelphia crime family, and under his rule, the city experiences fewer public street wars than most of its counterparts. That is neither absolution nor condemnation. It is a temperature reading. In his era, men still disappear, debts still come due, the law still knocks at dawn. But the open theater of violence that will scar the city in the early 1980s rarely finds a stage while he sits in the front pew and the back booth, urging tempers down and profits up. What remains closest to the man, beyond the ledgers, beyond the whispered alliances, is small and specific. He is known to adjust a chair by an inch before sitting, to set his hat brim with the same two-finger tap every time he steps inside, to straighten a picture frame in a friend's hallway without breaking the conversation. People read meaning into such habits. Maybe it is control, maybe comfort, maybe the quiet belief that a world aligned by small degrees can make room for larger mercies. In kitchens where his name is spoken softly, relatives remember how he stirs his espresso with 2 gentle turns, never clinking the spoon against the porcelain. The cup makes no sound. The message always does. The debate about his method is older than the city's cobblestones. Some say peace is merely the longest route to the same destination, power. Others say power without peace is a bonfire that burns the hand that lights it. In the boardwalk offices of Atlantic City, where casino ledgers once balanced as neatly as choir books, a few club owners still keep a thick envelope in a bottom drawer, labeled in pencil with nothing more than the word insurance. They do not mean fire or flood. They mean the absence of chaos he once negotiated like a careful broker. You can trace the curvature of his legacy through human memory as easily as through legal files. There's the bakery where the flour shipment never again missed its dawn delivery after one quiet conversation. There's the river pier where a foreman nods each time he walks past the old work light and thinks of the winter night the crew managed to finish because no one called a strike that week. There's the night watchman who swears he heard a mandolin upstairs on the evening before a citywide raid, somehow missed 3 addresses and ruined a 4th. None of these details write themselves into laws. All of them write themselves into neighborhoods. Of the commission rooms he leaves behind, the stories repeat with variations. A long table, the smell of smoke, the measuring eyes. He speaks less than the men who love to hear their names bounce off chandeliers, and yet somehow the notes drift back to Philadelphia in the exact shape he wants. That is a kind of influence too. Composure as policy, restraint as leverage. To the impatient, it looks like caution. To the ear trained in Villalba's square, it sounds like survival. A city is a set of rhythms. Under Angelo, one rhythm prevails: keep the doors open. In union halls, this means the handshake figure nobody admits to writing down. In nightclubs, it means the singer has a safe last set, and the doorman sends the troublemaker away before his shadow crosses the threshold. In the numbers game, it means every debt is tallied clean, because trust bleeds quickly once a single slip is lost. This rhythm does not sing, but it pays. The men who prefer melody to mathematics call it timid. The men who close their books at month's end call it proof. He is, in every meaningful sense, a man of rooms. The back room where the bottle of wine is placed exactly in the center, and the talk flows around it like a slow current. The upstairs room of the grocery, where words are chosen like tools, each one meant for fit rather than flourish. The parish hall where he volunteers envelopes for a fundraiser, because in public you show yourself made of the same material as the city that shelters you. The Snyder Avenue living room, where he counts breaths between doorbell chimes. Even the car at the end is a kind of room, a place of passage, controlled pace, measured angles. And yet legacy is not a room you control. It is what others arrange after you leave. In the early 1980s, after the blast that ends his decades of measured rule, violence spikes and newspapers begin to print the kind of photographs he spent 20 years preventing. Names that kept to whispers now howl, and the federal files thicken like winter coats. People who once complained that the city felt too quiet suddenly ask if anyone remembers how to speak in low tones again. Scholars and street historians still argue at the border between myth and legend. Many people still think that his refusal to flood Philadelphia with blood is what preserves the family's earning years. Others insist it merely delays necessary reckonings until the bill comes due all at once in the next era. So, what do you think? Is patience an art that extends a city's breath, or a dam that guarantees a louder break when it finally bursts? The answer may be written in how memory behaves when the house lights dim. Think of the callbacks that hold. The Villalba boy who learns to watch before acting. The market where a smile is never just a smile. The boardwalk night when he decides storms can be managed by moving sandbags early. The commission lunch where he says the customers care that the door stays open. The union winter where one work light burns past midnight because an argument goes for a walk in the cold and comes back smaller. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? The coins were small, the promise was large, and he carried both with the same gentle hand. His critics maintain that calm is a luxury purchased by others' fear. His defenders answer that fear is cheap and noisy, while calm rates at a higher price because it must be renewed each day by judgment. The statistics do not settle the matter. They never do. Reports can count bodies and dollars. They cannot weigh a week without a headline, or the relief a mother feels when the street outside her stoop remains a place to sit and talk. Closer to the man, the details continue to surface in quiet rooms. A nephew remembers how he never left a kitchen without wiping the table once with his sleeve, as though the surface of a day should be smoothed before the next one begins. A driver recalls that he preferred the window cracked an inch even in winter, because city air, honest or spoiled, should circulate. A priest says he listened more than he confessed, but always left the basket a little heavier than it was when he arrived. Tiny weights on the scale, and yet over years they tip the balance toward a portrait that is, if not saintly, then at least careful. The house on Snyder Avenue becomes an address that carries the resonance of a bell, familiar and unresolved. People slow down as they pass. An old woman points with her chin rather than her hand. Children hear scraps of the story and fill the rest with television images that belong to cities far away. To the young, the name is a legend. To the old, it is a season remembered by the way the market smelled at noon and how the cafes closed a half hour earlier after the news. If legacy is measured by imitation, then the next generation offers a warning. A few try to rule with his softness and fail to bring his discipline. Others choose the hammer and discover that a city can break faster than it can pay. Those who study him deeply come away with a narrower lesson. Gentleness is not absence of force. It is force that keeps its suit pressed and its voice low. It respects the arithmetic of consequences, the dignity of profitable days, the fragile trust of a neighborhood that agrees not to ask too many questions, so long as supper is on the table and the street remains mostly quiet. For all the arguments, one image persists. Late at night, a man pauses by a dim window, hears a mandolin somewhere above the street, and allows himself a small smile that belongs equally to Villalba and Philadelphia. He has moved olive groves into brick alleys and taught them to bear fruit. He has taken the patience of harvest and applied it to ledgers, docks, unions, and clubs. He has believed, perhaps naively, perhaps brilliantly, that a city can be managed like a market if the market is taught to breathe. This is where memory settles, not because it is neat, but because it is useful. Angelo Bruno is a story told by men who prefer to speak softly, by officers who remember a door opened with courtesy, by club owners who recall a last set sung without interruption, by a numbers clerk who never lost a slip, by a river wind that carries the scent of rain along Snyder Avenue and the boardwalk at the same time. Peace or power, the ledger lists both. The margin notes, straightened picture frames, a hat brim, 2 rotations of a spoon, suggest which one he reaches for first, and if the question must have an answer, it is this. He chooses peace as the shape of power because he understands that cities, like men, eventually reflect the tone of the voice that speaks to them most often. His voice remains the quiet one in the back room, the one that says, "We're going to keep the doors open, count the money carefully, shake hands when we can, and walk outside to talk when we can't." If you listen in the right parts of Philadelphia, you can still hear it under the louder stories. Steady as the tide, set the ledger down. Let the pages rest where the ink has dried and the numbers balance themselves into hush. The city that felt crowded a moment ago loosens its shoulders. Row houses settle. The market tents fold. The last cafe light clicks from gold to gray. Somewhere, a door closes softly so the latch won't wake the sleeping room. Breathe with that. In through the cool trace of rain on stone. Out with the day's noise. He has gone down the street now, hat brim set, steps even, turning the corner that all men turn. The night smooths the pavement behind him until it keeps only the suggestion of a footprint. Then even that fades into the shared quiet of bricks and branches. Think of Villalba's hills cooling after sunset, the olives giving up their warmth, the air settling into a slower rhythm that makes sleep feel honest. The same pace lives here, in a city of glass and trolley wire, when we decide to hear it. Let the mandolin note hold a second longer than usual. Let the boardwalk waves slow into a soft repetition you can count without counting. Doors remain closed, but not locked. Rooms breathe through a window cracked just an inch. If there was weight in the day, decisions, names, the steady lift of memory, lay it out like a coat over the chair's back and leave it there. You may straighten the picture frame once if you like, then leave it to stay straight on its own. Now the fan is a simple wind coming from a dark shore. The traffic becomes distant water. The city gives you permission to sleep because its work is finished for now, and in that pause you're allowed to finish yours. Let your eyes fall into the soft middle distance. Inhale. Exhale. We'll keep the doors open in the morning. For now, close yours gently.